Hello and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Kurt Mosser of the 107th District in Montour, Columbia, and Northumberland counties. Pennsylvania is facing a massive pension crisis. The systems for both state and public school employees are underfunded, putting stress on budgets at all levels of government. Representative Mike Tobash from Schuylkill County has been leading the discussion on this issue, and he's here today to update us. Representative Tobash, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome, Kurt. How are you today?
I'm great. I wanted to talk about public pension plan, what I deem as probably the #1 issue facing our state. Certainly as we go through our appropriations committee meetings and we're drafting the state budget, nothing affects it like the state pension crisis. Can I have your take on the pension crisis?
Sure. Well, I mean, you're exactly right. So if you're an advocate for public education system, the pension debt that we've compiled here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is crushing our public education system. We've got an employer contribution rate that is just going through the roof. I have some examples of schools in your district that we can take a look at, but it's taking money away from every service that is provided by state government. We're in a position right now where we've got in excess of $55 billion of debt built up in these public pension systems. There's two of them, one state employees, one the public school system employees, and we've got to manage our way out before things start getting better.
And I think it's important to note that the employees who are vested into this system are not to blame. I think there was some questionable decisions that were made in the past that got us to where we are at $50+ billion of underfunded, and the problem where we're seeing it eating up all of our revenues. Let's talk about on how we got to where we are here today. I think the first thing was probably in 1991, was it? Where the first thing that triggered where we are today?
Yeah, so there's a number of things. Number one, there's a public pension system that was established in the Commonwealth for these two groups of state employees. And it's a defined benefit plan, and the defined benefit plan says that the employee makes a contribution, the employer makes a contribution, and then there's interest earned on the funds that are being held in those pension systems. And then there's a promise made based on years of service, a multiplier, and final average salary. And that promise is that an employee retiring will get a certain amount of monthly income for the rest of their life. So if the employer contribution plus the employee contribution and the rate of return isn't enough to pay that benefit, the employer, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, inevitably the taxpayer, owes that money. And quite frankly, they just have not been managed very well. As you mentioned, there was a series of votes, and I'll go to a vote in the year 2000, Act 9, which retroactively increased the multiplier. So it enhanced the benefits of everyone who was in the retirement programs at that time. And then in the two subsequent years, in the year 2001 and 2002, there was Act 38 and Act 40, and those votes caused the legislature and inevitably the school districts to not make a contribution that was enough to keep up with the costs that we see are being developed for the benefits that we've promised now. In other words, the votes of Act 38 and Act 40 allowed the legislature not to make payments into the system based on some actuarial information and some assumptions on rates of return that just never came true. So here we are. We've got a defined benefit program where the taxpayer of the Commonwealth is at risk. We've got the government's inability or lack of ability to make the payments on time when they were supposed to make them, coupled with a number of years where we had terrible returns in the marketplace. We all continue to talk about the Great Recession, which is just behind us, but poor market returns, lack of employer contributions, retroactive increases in benefits, put us in a position that we're about $50–60 billion in debt.
So I think you're exactly right that some bad decisions were made here. Let's talk about going forward. Going forward from here, do we repeat the same issues that we've faced in the past? And in other words, do we allow it to be legislatively driven where the multiplier can be increased and not pay the required payments? Going forward to make it solvent, what are some of the plans that are out there that you think might address it going forward?
So there's a number of plans that were proposed in the last session. We had one. Our Representative Camp had a plan. Representative Glenn Grell had a plan. There were some conversations in the Senate. Really, the House was leading the conversation here. Look, it's so chronic that everyone is talking about it, from the administration, not quite as much to the Senate, indicating that it is their number one issue that they're dealing with. And I know that in the House we've worked tirelessly on coming up with a solution. But again, the solution needs to be from multiple fronts. And a couple of the goals that we had in the last session, Kurt, sort of went like this. Number one, you've got this huge amount of debt. What should we be doing? We should be, number one, reducing costs. Okay, so you got a tremendous amount of debt, lower costs. Number two, try and develop savings so that you can take those savings and throw them at the debt. Number three, come up with a plan that is adequate and sustainable for new employees coming into the system moving forward. And number four, shift the risk away from the taxpayer, shift the risk away from the legislature making these poor decisions into a program that will pay the employee at the time of service, similar to what most businesses have gone to in the private sector. I think that as people listen to this and they understand pension issues, they kind of understand it from two basic standpoints. Number one, you got that traditional pension plan where someone promises to pay you something, a monthly amount for the rest of your life. Number two, you've got a plan like a 401k plan, which is a defined contribution plan where you get paid at the time of service and then you invest the money. Let me tell you, Kurt, a lot of people appreciate the benefits of 401ks. Number one, they actually get paid. I mean, when you take a look at the rest of the country, you can look at the publicity that they're getting in Detroit because they went bankrupt as a result of their defined benefit program. Those employees are not getting what they were promised because of lack of that political subdivision's ability to manage their pension problem. You know, the employees in Detroit would have been far better getting paid at the time of service, managing that money. So, number one, you get paid at the time that you perform the service. Number two, you've got the ability to manage that account moving forward. It is portable. If you're in a job and you leave that job and you take it somewhere else, that benefit, the amount of money you've accumulated, is portable.
I think that's important too, because while right now we have a 10-year vesting period, is that correct?
That's right.
State? So a lot of employees don't last through that 10 years of service to be vested in the state pension. So this portability, I think, is very important. Probably second, for sure, second to, we have to take the onus off the taxpayer. And that's what I think a lot of our plans in the House are focusing on, taking that risk away from the taxpayer. But I want to make it clear, though, most of them, if not all of them, certainly the ones that we've been looking at, have not touched current employees, because there's a lot of misinformation out there that current employees or current retirees, according to most of the House plans, the ones that we've seriously been taking a look at, are not affected by the plans that we're talking about.
So you're right. People get freaked out when they talk about pension reform. And you know what? And I think one of the reasons that we didn't get it accomplished in the last session was we didn't properly dissect the problem. We didn't dissect it enough, meaning what is pension reform to this person or that person? I mean, I know what it is to the property taxpayer. It's they can't stand to pay any more property tax, and they see their property taxes going up really as a direct result of this huge amount of debt we have and the increased requirement to pay into these pension systems. You know, but if you're somebody that's in the system right now, I talk to them all the time and I say, you know, we need to really shore these things up so that we can keep the promises that we've made to you. And reducing costs is an important element of that. Shifting risk is an important element. But the plans we developed in the House would only be for future employees. Future employees moving forward, we're asking them to take a different benefit that would be adequate and sustainable, which is attractive to most employees in the marketplace today, which is portable, as we just mentioned, but transferable as well. I got to tell you about 401ks. It's terrific. You can pass them on to your children and grandchildren. You can't do that with a defined benefit program. And you know, when I talk to young people and ask them about their belief in their ability to collect Social Security, so many of them tell me no, they don't believe they'll be able to collect Social Security. You know, the reason for that is because we've got a tremendous amount of debt in our Social Security system.
Right.
We're not so different right now in our Pennsylvania state pension systems. For people to be taking their employee contributions and putting them into a program that is $50 billion in debt has them concerned. That's why many people today coming into service with the state or someone else, they really appreciate a 401k type defined contribution plan.
Yeah, I think the younger folks coming in do see that benefit. They see stability. And I think that's a key to it, is that having stability instead of the uncertain, because we could be Detroit. If we keep going down the same path we're going on, we very well could be the next Detroit where you just lose everything. So I think it's important that, and there was a lot of misinformation going out, that the current retirees understand that the plans we have going forward, their plans, if they're already retired, are safe, and we're only looking at future retirees going forward. That doesn't, it does in a small part affect the unfunded liability part. That's another part that we're going to have to tackle. Is that something that we want to talk about today? I mean, how do we...
So specifically, we are trying to implement a new plan to rescue the benefits that we have promised to employees in the system right now. We're trying to rescue those benefits, and believe me, status quo is not their friend. There's no question about it. Then you get into the next argument that says, well, this doesn't have immediate savings. Well, I can tell you, we didn't get in this problem overnight. We just talked about votes that were made in 2000, 2001, 2002. Even as recently as 2010, Act 120 that we're living under right now has put us on this schedule to pay the debt back, but I have to tell you that that act once again put off paying the bill when the bill was due. So we need to get to it ASAP. We have to get to it as soon as we possibly can, not affecting current members in the system. This is for future employees only. And the argument about developing immediate savings goes back to that point. Look, if we're only going to affect new people coming in the system and try and reduce costs to rescue the benefits we've got, you've got to realize that we're not going to realize savings immediately. We didn't get in the problem immediately. We've got to stop the bleeding. We've got to work our way out of the problem in a thoughtful way.
Great, great. I appreciate everything. Let's talk about one more thing I think that's important before we wrap this up, but what has this done to Pennsylvania as far as the credit rating goes?
So when I talk about people that are in the system right now, what is pension reform to them? It's keep the promise that you've made me. When I talk to retirees, they say, look, I've got a meager pension. I retired 20 years ago, and with inflation, I've hardly got enough to pay for my current bills. So they're looking at for cost of living increases. When I talk about somebody new coming into the system, they want something that's sustainable and adequate and something that they know they're going to get paid for. And when you take a look at the financial analysts in the Commonwealth, for the Commonwealth, you'll see that they've given us poor marks. They've lowered our bond rating. They've driven up the cost of doing business because two things. Number one, when they take a look at our debt and they see that it's $50, $60 billion, they're not certain that we can pay it back. Number two, when they look at it, they haven't seen that we've got a desire to pay it back. Every time we've been given the opportunity to either make the payment or do something different, we've done something different. That's why switching over to a defined contribution plan will put us on a path to not allow us to do this anymore. It'll put us on a path that Pennsylvania ends up never getting back in this situation again.
I think that's key. I think that's so key that we take this out of hands of the legislature. We make it a defined contribution plan, that we can't make the same mistakes of the past, that going forward, we stop the bleeding. And it's key that we protect our taxpayers, that the taxpayers don't hold the bag all the time going forward. So if you mind just wrap it up, we only have about a minute to go, Mike, and I appreciate you coming out here and I appreciate your work in this problem. If you could just wrap it up in a couple seconds.
So we'll try and go quick, but I can tell you this, that number one, there is no magic bullet. Okay, there's nothing that we're going to do that is immediately going to get us out of $50 billion of debt. I can tell you that status quo, maintaining the program that we've got right now, this defined benefit program that has gotten us into this mess, is not the answer. I think people are beginning to understand that we've got a tremendous problem here. It's the elephant in the roof. It's affecting everything that state government does, and everyone should be supporting meaningful pension reform. If you're opposing meaningful pension reform right now, I can tell you that you do not have the best interest of our public school systems at heart, or anything, or all of the other programs that really the Commonwealth funds that are really requirements for our citizens.
Couldn't have said it better. Thanks again, Mike. That's all the time we have for today's program. I'm State Representative Kurt Mosser. If you need assistance with any state government matter, feel free to contact me at my local office. The address and number will be shown in a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join me next time for Legislative Report.